I went outside about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right in the middle of downtown, and was kind of walking to my favorite little Italian restaurant, which was like 2 blocks away. And as I was walking across a crosswalk, I had a man come up and tug on the back of my sleeve. And I grew up in and around cities, and I'm very defensive when I'm in public spaces. I'm also I'm a large land mammal. I'm 6'4". I weigh like 265. Right. I'm
Not
not
a very
easily,
likely target. Yeah.
no, I'm not
Yeah.
easily intimidated by someone who's 5'5", tugging on my sleeve in the middle of the street. And so I kind of wheeled around with that reactionary, like, here we go, sort of attitude, only to find an older gentleman there who was very taken aback by my sudden and aggressive spin. And he had a story, and his story was that his car had broken down. It was a confidence scam right from the start, and I knew it. And for me, this kind of put me in an awkward situation because I've always been somebody who's been very, I guess, philanthropic. I've done a lot of teaching. I've done a lot with my career that helps other people. Um, I didn't want to seem mistrustful. I'm a white dude in the American South. The man who had been tugging on my sleeve was African American. It presented a dilemma to where if I immediately was cautious or resentful or standoffish, I might give the appearance of racial bias, and that was not my intention. And so I let him tell his story, and he was very, very convincing. Got me into that appeal of like, okay, I'm going to do the bare minimum I can to help you because I'm super, super leery. He was also with a woman who was visibly pregnant. As I said, it was November. It was cold. The situation was just awkward. I happened to have an old school minivan at the time. It was a 1980s Dodge Voyager, terrible camping vehicle. But you alluded to my life outside, right? Like I love going camping in the winter. And this vehicle was great because I had taken out all the seats and I could drive back up right to a campfire, pop the tailgate, flip the switch so the lights went out and the campfire would keep me warm. It was a horrible
Very
vehicle.
practical. Yep.
Yeah, it was great. Um, so that's where I kind of was. And I was like, okay, you need a ride to the impound lot, which supposedly was where his car was. That was maybe a mile away from where I was. I was like, I'm driving you straight there, dropping you off. And that's the end of this public service. We're done. Everybody's fine. I'm going to walk away happy. The woman sat down in the passenger seat, fastened her seatbelt, and plastered her face against the glass. It was instantly like she just magnetically drew right in. And I began thinking, okay, this is not good. The man behind me was sitting where the seats should have been, and he came up rather aggressively over the back of the seat. He had a Smith & Wesson J-frame with which he popped me on the back of the head, and that started, in effect, what was an hour of driving around downtown Atlanta looking for an ATM, a drive-up ATM where I could withdraw some money.
Did he hit you just to let you know that he had a pistol or a revolver? He wasn't trying to knock you out or anything.
No, not at that point.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
it was just a hello. This has
Look
begun.
what I got. Yeah. Sure.
And
Wow.
it alternated between him. He hit me several times over the head, but he would stick the barrel right up against my ribs. I was wearing a sports coat, business casual style. So, and he would thrum up and down on my ribs, kind of go like that to let me know that,
Yeah, it's there.
that it's there. And for him at that point, it would have been a contact shot. There was no avoiding it. I was facing backwards. But I knew these neighborhoods like the back of my hand. And so I was crafty. I wasn't going to give in, and I was going to wait him out. And I was looking for the opportunity to get out of the situation, to present itself magically to me, thinking the universe would provide. So I would drive and he would say, okay, turn here. And I would conveniently miss the turn, or he would say, we need to go this direction. And I would say, okay. And I would drive and I would miss it. And I got into these neighborhoods in Midtown Atlanta where there are miles of connected streets among the old craftsman houses, and there's no banks. Roughly 55 minutes into it, it was unavoidable. I was coming out at a location near where I lived, but I knew that there was always at this corner an off-duty sheriff's deputy that would stand guard in front of the ATM. And so I specifically drove to that bank. And I was like, I'm going in. I'm going to give him the eye. I don't know what it would look like, right? But in my mind, I was like, I'm in trouble with my eyes. Wheeled up to the bank. And as I drove around counterclockwise, he left his position and got into his cruiser and took his lunch break. And so I pulled up to the ATM at that point in time, withdrew $200. Like I said, first job out of college. I don't even know if I had $300 in my bank account at the time, but that was my daily withdrawal limit. So I took it out and I had a stack of bills in my hand, and I wheeled around as fast as I could to hand him the money at the same time that he came up sort of in between the seats to take the money. And I ended up punching him squarely in the face. And it was just a contact shot sort of behind like that.
Like a backhand almost.
Yeah.
Back fist.
And he didn't shoot me. And that's what I knew, right? Like I knew then, okay, I'm going to survive this, number one.
Yep.
But two, I need to survive it and I need to get over my guilt because for the hour that I was driving, I kept weighing the human consequence of what if I wreck this vehicle, right? Well, the woman who I believe to be an accomplice sitting in the passenger seat, pregnant, he's sitting in the back. I'm imagining him flying through the windshield. But for me, this was a very traumatic and telling time because I knew then I was going to survive the situation. And I also came to terms at that moment with the fact that I was fine with killing this guy, right? I had reached a point from a moral standpoint where by any means necessary meant freeing myself from this situation, extricating myself.
Sure.
Any ideas of pacifism or wherever I was reevaluating those in real time. And so I drove out, and this was in the late 1990s. Atlanta was a very busy place. And I drove out onto Ponce de Leon down to the main drag in Atlanta, Peachtree Street, where the Fox Theater was, maybe 4 or 5 blocks worth of transit within this space. And it's bumper to bumper traffic. And the entire time I'm thinking, how am I going to run this into a light pole? How am I going to get out of the situation? And the opportunity that finally presented itself came by means of James Brown. James Brown was standing on the sidewalk with his entourage, and the woman in the passenger seat said something to the effect of like, "Oh my God, it's James Brown." At which point in time, attention in the vehicle diverted to him, and I was out into traffic. I didn't even put the van in park. I literally jumped out of the driver's side door into traffic and weaved my way through to the safe side of the street. I was in shock. I went back to work. When I punched him, I forgot to mention, that's when he really legitimately capped me on the back of the head, and he cut the back of my scalp. So I was in shock. I went back to work. I walked about 2 miles down to where my office was, walked right back into my cubicle, put my headset on, and started taking calls. And my manager comes up behind me, and she's talking to me very cautiously. And she says, "Did you know you're bleeding?" And I reached up and I patted the back of my head, and my hand came back bloody. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got mugged over lunch." And
Matter of
she's like,
factly.
yeah, just matter of factly, right? And that's kind of when I came out of it. She hit the receiver on my phone, hung up my call that I was on, and then I'm doing the report with the police and all that nonsense. But for me,
Wow.
it took that probably hour and a half's worth of downtime before I even realized, hey, I was just in a legitimate situation, right? And I carried a pocket knife with me at all times then, but that was the extent of EDC that I practiced. So I called up a friend of mine who, he's a bailiff for the Cobb County courts at that point. And I said, I need to know what I don't know. I want to use a gun. I went out the very next day. I got a concealed carry permit. Licensure at that point in time was just, you sign your name, you're done. I bought a Keltec PF9 and a holster. Sad to say right now, I don't even remember whose holster brand it was, but it was an in-waistband holster. And I began carrying. I went from being mugged to being in the concealed carry space within a period of about 24 hours.